Okay. You sent us a really interesting collection of research this time around.
Yeah.
All about reading motivation.
Hmm.
And we've got a pretty big review to dig into.
Yeah, we do.
So
Hmm.
today, our mission is to kind of like get to the heart of this research
Yeah.
and figure out, how researchers understand motivation when it comes to reading,
Yes.
why they study it,
Hmm.
and what are some of the big ideas coming out of the research.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. If you want to be in the know about reading motivation,
Hmm.
this is like a shortcut.
A crash course.
Yeah, you don't have to read, tons and tons of articles and
Right.
books and stuff.
Exactly.
We're going to do the work for you.
Absolutely.
So the main source we're looking at is this really comprehensive review article
Hmm.
that looked at 92 different research articles.
Yes.
All about reading motivation.
Right.
And these were all published in peer-reviewed journals
Yep.
between 2003 and 2013.
Yeah, a good decade of research.
So, yeah, solid 10 years of work in the field.
Absolutely.
And what's really cool about this particular review is that it zooms in on how these different research articles actually used key terms related to motivation.
Yes, how they defined them and how they used them in their research.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't just about like summarizing the findings or anything. It was really about how are they actually using these words.
Right. And so one of the things that kind of jumped out at us when we were reading this review
It's fascinating, isn't it?
was that even though, there's a lot of agreement that motivation is super important.
Yeah, everybody agrees that motivation is essential for reading.
Right. For reading.
Yeah, you can't have good readers without motivated readers.
Right. Like
The foundation.
it's kind of like what makes it all happen.
Absolutely.
But even though there's agreement on that, this review found that there are some pretty big inconsistencies in how researchers are defining and investigating motivation.
Yes, in how they're conceptualizing it and studying it.
Right.
Mhm.
It's kind of like if everyone agreed that a car needs an engine to run,
Right.
but nobody could agree on what an engine actually is or how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a different engine in mind.
Right.
Mhm.
And so that's why this deep dive is so important.
Right.
Because, research keeps showing us that reading motivation
Yeah.
isn't just some, nice to have thing.
Right. It's not just a bonus, not the cherry on top.
Right. It's not extra.
It really is fundamental.
It's like it actually helps explain why some kids are really good at reading
Mhm.
and others struggle, even when you take into account things like their cognitive skills.
Yes, their decoding abilities,
Right.
their vocabulary knowledge,
Right.
their comprehension strategies, even when you factor those in, motivation still explains
Wow.
unique variance in reading comprehension.
So it's like its own separate thing. That's really powerful.
It really is.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit more for our listeners.
So what you're saying is if we really want to understand,
Yeah.
why a student is doing well or not doing well in reading,
Mhm.
we can't just look at, can they sound out words? Can they understand the vocabulary?
Right. Can they answer comprehension questions?
Right.
Right.
We also have to look at what motivates them to read in the first place.
Yes. Are they interested in what they're reading? Do they value reading?
Right.
Do they see themselves as good readers?
Do they enjoy it?
Y-
Right. So it's
yeah.
like looking at the whole child, the whole reader.
The whole reader, absolutely.
Not just, not just cognitive pieces.
Their brain power.
Right.
So, and I think this is where this review gets really interesting,
Mhm.
because one of the big things they point out is that there's this lack of agreement on the language that we use when we talk about reading motivation.
Yes, there's a lot of terminological disarray.
Right, like we're not all on the same page about what these words mean.
Exactly.
And it seems like that can make it really, really hard to actually understand. Absolutely.
The research and to compare what different studies are finding.
Right, because if everyone's using the same words to mean different things,
Right.
different words to mean the same thing, it's hard to know what's really going on.
It's like apples and oranges, right?
Exactly. Like, are we even talking about the same fruit here?
Right. And so I think that's a big takeaway for our listeners, right?
That's
It's
like-
not
yeah.
just that, researchers are being nitpicky about words.
Right.
It's that this lack of a shared language
Yeah.
can actually slow down progress in figuring out how to help kids become more motivated readers.
Exactly, because research might be talking past each other
Right.
without realizing it.
So it has real implications.
It does. It has implications for practice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the authors of this review, they're really calling for more definitional clarity in the field.
Yes, they say we need to be much more precise about what we mean when we use these terms.
Right. Like, let's all get on the same page about our vocabulary. Absolutely. If we want to have a meaningful conversation about reading motivation,
Right.
we need to start with a shared understanding of the words we're using.
Yeah, and from what I understand, this inconsistency in how we use these terms
Mm-hmm.
kind of shows up in two main ways.
Yes.
One is when researchers sort of lump together all these different specific concepts,
Right.
like how confident a student feels about their reading.
That's self-efficacy.
Right, self-efficacy, and then like
Yeah.
their overall feelings towards reading,
Right. Whether they like it or dislike it.
positive or negative, do they even care?
That's attitude.
Attitudes, right, and what they want to get out of reading.
Goals.
Goals, right, and all of that gets lumped together under this big umbrella term of motivation.
Yeah, just motivation. And
Wow.
that loses a lot of the nuance, right? Because self-efficacy is different from attitudes, which is different from goals, and they all play a role in motivation, but they're not the same thing.
Right, so it's like we're oversimplifying it.
Yeah. We're oversimplifying it, and we're losing some of the richness
No,
of the
no, no.
concept.
Okay, and then the other problem is when researchers use terms
Yeah.
that are actually quite different, as if they're interchangeable.
Exactly like synonyms.
Yeah,
So using motivation and attitude and interest as if they all mean the same thing,
right.
when actually there are important distinctions between those concepts.
Right, and so the review points out that those terms are often used without acknowledging those differences.
Yeah, they just kind of use them willy-nilly without saying, hey, we know these are different, but we're using them
Right.
interchangeably here.
Right, and so when we do that, when we just kind of blur those lines,
Yeah,
it can make it really hard to understand
absolutely.
what's actually influencing reading behavior.
Yes, because those different constructs are thought to operate in different ways.
Right.
So if we're not clear about which one we're talking about, it's hard to understand how it's affecting reading.
Got it. So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the history of this whole field
Okay.
of reading motivation research.
Mm-hmm.
Because, this isn't brand new.
No, it's not.
This has been around for a while.
Researchers have been interested in this for over a century.
Over a century.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So
That's a long history.
what were they focused on back in the early days?
So in the early days, the emphasis was very much on fostering a love of reading,
Okay.
instilling this personal hunger for books.
So like getting kids to just love reading for the sake of reading.
That intrinsic motivation to read.
Right. So more about that internal desire
Mm-hmm.
than any kind of external reward or pressure.
Right. It was about fostering that internal drive.
Got it.
And then kind of moving into the mid-20th century,
Mm-hmm.
the field started to shift a little bit.
Okay.
And there was more of a move towards trying to identify specific components of motivation,
Okay.
trying to break it down into its constituent parts.
So like trying to get more specific about what actually makes
Yeah.
up this thing
Okay.
called motivation.
Yeah, not just love of reading, but what are the different pieces that contribute to that?
Right.
Right.
But then, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly,
Yeah.
this is around when behaviorism was really dominant in psychology.
That's right.
And so I'm guessing that probably put a bit of a damper on research on
It did.
innovation.
Because behaviorism wasn't really interested in internal mental states.
Right.
It was all about,
It was about observable behaviors.
right, you can't observe motivation directly.
Exactly. You can't see it. You can't measure it directly.
So it wasn't really a focus.
So much.
And even when cognitive psychology started to become,
Right.
the big thing,
Yeah. Took a while.
research on reading motivation was still kind of slow to pick up again.
Yeah. It was slow to regain momentum.
And I'm guessing that's partly because things like attitude and interest and all that,
Yes. Those affective
they were
variables,
still kind of hard to define precisely.
they are very slippery concepts.
Like, how do you really pin down what attitude is? Exactly. One researcher actually joked that trying to define attitude
Oh, God.
is like compiling a huge list of existing definitions and hoping yours is somehow better.
So it's almost like it's this never-ending cycle of definitions.
They can feel that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But eventually, research on reading motivation did start to make a comeback.
It did, thankfully.
So what kind of led to that renewed interest?
Well, I think there were a few things.
Okay.
One was that researchers were realizing that
Mm.
decades of focusing primarily on comprehension skills
Right.
hadn't really moved the needle that much in terms of overall reading proficiency.
So, like, even though kids were getting better at certain skills.
Yeah, their decoding was improving, their vocabulary was growing, their comprehension strategies were getting more sophisticated.
They weren't necessarily becoming better readers overall.
Right, they weren't necessarily reading more or enjoying reading more.
Right.
And so researchers started to think, maybe we're missing something here. Maybe there's more to it than just these cognitive skills.
And so they started to look at engagement.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was kind of the beginning of this resurgence.
Oh.
But the review does point out that a lot of that initial focus on engagement
Right.
was based more on intuition than on hard evidence.
So, like, a gut feeling that it was important.
Right.
Not a lot of research to back it up yet.
Exactly.
Okay. And then was there a specific event or something that kind of...
Well, I think one of the big turning points was the establishment of the NRRC.
The NRC.
Yeah, the National Reading Research Center in the early 1990s.
Right.
And one of the NRC's main goals was to understand and promote the motivational factors
Got it.
that contribute to reading success.
Okay, so now we've got like a national organization
Right.
that's saying, hey, this is important.
This is important. We need to study this.
Right.
We need to fund research on this.
Right. And that led to some concrete developments, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Like in terms of tools and measures to actually study this stuff.
Right. So the NRC funded research that led to the development of things like
Okay.
the Motivation to Read profile,
Okay, the motivation to read profile.
which is a survey that's used to assess different facets of reading motivation.
Okay.
And around the same time, other instruments like the Elementary Reading Attitude Survey and the Motivation to Read questionnaire were also developed.
So now we're starting to get some actual ways to measure
Right.
these different aspects of motivation.
Exactly.
And was that when the research started to show this strong link between reading, achievement, and motivation?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Those new instruments allowed researchers to really start to investigate that relationship.
Yeah.
And what they found was that there's a strong correlation between how motivated students are to read
Okay.
and how well they actually achieve in reading.
So the two are really intertwined.
They are.
You can't separate
You
them.
can't really talk about one without the other.
Got it. So that gives us a nice overview of, how we got to where we are today
Right. The historical context.
with this research.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's dive into the specifics of this concept analysis.
Okay.
What exactly did the researchers do to figure out how these different motivational terms
Mm-hmm.
were being used in the research?
So basically, they conducted this really detailed review.
Okay.
And remember, I said before that this wasn't like a typical meta-analysis where they're
Mhm.
trying to summarize the findings of different studies.
Right.
This was really about describing how the concept of reading motivation was being defined and investigated.
It's more about the language itself.
It's about the language, yeah.
Right.
Like, what do researchers mean when they say motivation or self-efficacy or attitudes?
Got it. So they weren't so much interested in the results of the studies as in how they were using these words.
Exactly.
And so to do this, they first had to identify,
Oh, yeah.
the key terms that they wanted to analyze.
Yeah.
So how do they do that?
So they looked at both research specifically on reading motivation and also broader literature from educational psychology.
Okay.
And based on that review, they identified 12 key constructs that they really wanted to scrutinize.
Okay. 12 key terms.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me the list. What are they?
All right. So we've got agency attitudes, expectancy, extrinsic motivation,
Mm-hmm.
interest, intrinsic motivation, reading motivation itself,
Okay.
self-beliefs, self-concept, self-efficacy, and value.
So quite a range of terms.
Yeah, quite a range.
And they all relate to motivation in some way.
They all relate to motivation, but they're distinct concepts.
Right. And I noticed that they didn't include engagement.
Yes, that was a deliberate choice.
Okay, so why leave out engagement?
Well, because engagement often includes observable behaviors.
Right, like whether a kid is on task or, participating in class.
Exactly. And they wanted to focus specifically on the internal factors.
Right.
The internal drivers of motivation.
So the things that are happening inside the student's mind.
Yes, the things that make them want to read rather than just how they behave when they're reading.
Got it. So it's about the why not just the what.
Exactly.
Okay, so once they had their 12 key terms, they had to go out and find research articles
Right?
that use those terms.
Yeah.
So how did they go about doing that?
They used a very systematic process.
Okay.
They searched all the major academic databases
Okay.
using those 12 terms as keywords.
Right.
And they also combined those terms with other keywords like reading and literacy.
Okay.
And that gave them a big initial pool of potential studies.
Mm-hmm.
And then they looked at the references of those articles
Right.
to see if there were any other relevant studies they might have missed.
So they cast a really wide net.
They did, yeah.
Okay, and then they had to narrow it down.
Right.
So what were their criteria for deciding which studies to include in their final analysis?
So they had a few key criteria.
Okay.
First, they only included studies that were published in peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah. Okay, so that means they've gone through a rigorous review process.
Exactly. It's kind of like a quality control check.
Right.
And then they only included studies that were published from 2003 onward.
Okay, so pretty recent research.
Yeah, they wanted to look at contemporary usage.
Right.
And they also only included studies that actually presented empirical data.
Right, so not just theoretical articles.
Right. They wanted studies that had collected data from real people.
Okay.
And then finally, they only included studies that had a primary focus on reading motivation.
Got it.
So not studies that just mentioned motivation in passing.
Right, it had to be the main focus of the study.
Exactly.
Okay, and then you mentioned earlier that they also had a criterion related to journal impact factor.
Yes, that's right.
So reminding, what was that all about?
So journal impact factor is kind of a way of measuring how influential a journal is.
Okay.
How often its articles are cited by other researchers.
Right.
And so they actually excluded studies that were published in journals with lower impact factors because they wanted to focus on research that's considered to be, high quality and influential in the field.
So they wanted to make sure they were looking at the research that's really shaping the field.
Exactly.
Okay. So all of those criteria led them to their final set of 92 studies.
That's right.
Okay, so now let's get to the good stuff.
All right.
What did they actually find when they looked at how these 92 studies were defining those key terms?
Okay, so the really big overarching finding was that only 17% of the terms.
17%?
Yeah, only 17% of those 12 terms that they were looking for
Wow.
actually had explicit definitions in the studies.
So in most cases, the researchers just didn't clearly state what they meant by those terms.
Right, they didn't say, here's what we mean by motivation, or here's what we mean by self-efficacy.
Wow, that's surprising.
It is a bit surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that that would be like the first step, right?
You'd think so.
Like defining your terms.
Yeah.
So if they weren't defining them explicitly, how are they defining them?
So the review identified what they called implicit definitions.
Implicit definitions. Okay.
Yeah, and those accounted for a much bigger chunk of the terms, 64%.
Wow. So most of the time, they were relying on these implicit definitions.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about what an implicit definition is.
All right, so there are a few different types of implicit definitions.
Okay.
One is what they call implicit conceptual.
Implicit conceptual. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where the researchers kind of allude to the meaning of a
Yeah.
term without giving you a formal definition.
So like they're giving you hints.
Right. They're giving you clues,
Okay.
but they're not spelling it out for you.
Got it. Can you give me an example?
Sure. So like they might describe readers with positive self-concepts
Mhm.
as individuals who, enjoy reading and feel confident in their abilities.
Right.
But they wouldn't actually say self-concept means,
Right. They're not giving you that clear definition.
No, they're not giving you the dictionary definition.
Okay. What's another type of implicit definition?
Another type is what they call implicit referential.
Implicit referential. Okay.
And that's where researchers basically adopt a definition from another source,
Okay.
but they don't actually quote it directly in their own paper.
Okay. So they might just like cite another article and say, okay, that's what we mean by self-beliefs or whatever.
Or they might just say, for a definition of self-belief, see Bandura 1997.
Right. And so if you want to know what they really mean,
Yeah.
you have to go back and read that other article.
Right. You have to do the legwork.
And what if that article's also vague?
That's the problem, right? It
Yeah.
could lead you down a rabbit hole.
Right. And then you end up with no clear definition.
Exactly.
Okay. What's the third type?
The third type is implicit operational.
Implicit operational. Okay.
And this is where the definition of a term is only implied through the instruments
Okay.
or the measures that they use to assess it.
So like the test itself becomes the definition.
Yeah.
Okay. So for example.
So if they're using a particular reading motivation questionnaire, then reading motivation is basically defined as whatever that questionnaire measures.
Right. Whatever those items are tapping into.
Exactly.
Okay. And then there was like a small percentage where the terms weren't defined at all.
Yeah, the remaining 19%.
Wow. So in almost a fifth of the cases,
Yeah.
they were just using these terms without any definition whatsoever.
Right. Just assuming that everybody knows what they mean,
Wow.
which is a risky assumption.
Right. So as a reader of this research, you're kind of left guessing.
Yeah, you're left wondering, what are they actually talking about?
So what are the dangers of relying so heavily on these implicit definitions?
Well, the authors of this review, they really stress the importance of clear and explicit language
Okay.
because without it, there's a real danger of misinterpreting research findings
Right.
and making generalizations that might not be accurate.
Right. It's like if you're reading a recipe and it says, add some sugar,
Right.
but it doesn't say how much sugar. Your cake could turn out way too sweet or not sweet enough.
Right. Or maybe they meant powdered sugar and you used granulated sugar.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right. So it's like you need that precision.
You need that precision. Yeah.
Okay. So this lack of clear definitions is probably contributing to this bigger problem
Yes.
of terminological disarray that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Where we're all using these terms in different ways.
Yeah, it's like everyone's speaking slightly different dialect of motivation.
Right.
We need a universal translator.
Exactly.
Okay.
So can you give us some specific examples
Sure.
of problematic usage that they found in the studies?
Yeah, so one of the most common issues was what they called the synonymous use of distinct constructs.
Synonymous use. Okay.
Yeah, and that basically means using terms as if they mean the same thing
Right.
when actually they represent different ideas.
Right. And you said that happened in about a third of the studies.
Almost a third. Yeah, 32%.
Wow.
Yeah. So a pretty common problem.
Okay. So what's an example of that?
So one example they give is using the terms interest and attitudes
Right.
interchangeably.
So as if those are the same thing,
Exactly.
but they're not.
They're not.
Okay.
Interest is more about, what a person finds engaging or enjoyable,
Right.
whereas attitudes are more about their overall evaluations of something.
Right. So like I could be interested in something,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily have a positive attitude towards it.
Right. Like you might be interested in true crime podcasts,
Right.
but have a negative attitude towards violence.
Exactly.
Right.
And they also mentioned that attitudes and motivation were often confused.
Yes, that was another common pairing
Okay.
where researchers were using them as synonyms.
But again, those are different concepts.
They are.
Yeah.
Motivation is much broader than attitudes.
Okay.
It encompasses attitudes, but it also includes things like goals and values
Right.
and self-efficacy.
So attitudes are just one piece of the puzzle.
One piece of the puzzle, yeah.
Okay, so that's one problem.
That's one problem.
Using terms synonymously when they're actually distinct.
Mm-hmm.
What's another issue they found?
Another issue was what they called vague associations among terms.
Vague associations. Okay.
Yeah, and this happened in about 20% of the studies.
Okay.
And it's where researchers use kind of ambiguous language to
Huh.
describe the relationship between different concepts.
So give me an example.
So they might say that motivation involves certain factors,
Okay.
but they don't specify what that involvement means.
Right. So is it a causal relationship? Is it a correlation?
Exactly.
Is it just like they're somehow related?
Yeah, it's very unclear, and it can be hard to tell what they're really trying to say.
It's like saying that being healthy involves exercise,
Right.
but not saying how much exercise you should do
Exactly.
or what kind of exercise.
Or how exercise actually contributes to health.
Right. So it's not very helpful.
Not very helpful, yeah.
Okay. And you said they found that a lot with interest and self-concept.
Yes. They frequently found that interest and self-concept were characterized by these vague associations.
Right. So it's like we know they're related somehow, but we're not really sure how.
Exactly.
Okay. And then there was a third issue that I think is maybe the most concerning.
Yes.
Which is when researchers actually make inaccurate statements about these terms.
Yeah, that was another 20% of the studies.
So again, a pretty sizable chunk of the research.
Yeah, it's a worrying trend.
Okay, so what does that look like?
So this could involve misrepresenting a definition from a cited source,
Okay.
or just stating something that's factually incorrect.
So can you give us an example?
Sure. So one example they give is the term self-efficacy,
Okay.
which is a very specific concept that was defined by Bandura.
Right.
And Bandura's definition of self-efficacy is about a person's belief in their ability
Right.
to succeed in specific situations or tasks.
Right. So it's very context specific.
It is very specific.
Okay.
But they found that in some studies, self-efficacy was presented as a more general sense of confidence.
So like just overall how confident you feel.
Yeah, like a global self-esteem kind of thing,
Yeah.
which is not what Bandura meant.
Right. It's a distortion of the original definition.
Exactly.
And they highlighted the misuse of self-concept.
Yes, self-concept was another one that was frequently misused.
Okay. And so self-concept, is that more about your overall view of yourself?
Yeah, it's more global, it's more general.
Okay.
So it includes things like your academic self-concept, your social self-concept,
Right.
your physical self-concept.
Whereas self-efficacy is really about your belief in your ability to do a specific task.
Right.
Okay, so it's like a specific versus general kind of distinction.
Exactly.
Got it.
And they found that self-concept was often used when researchers really meant self-efficacy.
So they were kind of using the wrong term for the job.
Yeah, they were using a broader term when they really meant the more specific one.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of confusion
A lot of confusion.
around these basic terms.
Right.
So what about theoretical frameworks?
Mm-hmm.
Were researchers generally grounding their work?
So to varying degrees,
Yeah.
they found that some theories were cited more frequently than others.
So, okay, so which ones were the most popular?
So the most frequently cited theory was self-determination theory, or SDT.
SDT, okay.
Yeah, and SDT is all about how our basic psychological needs, like the need for autonomy, competence, and relatedness,
Right.
drive our motivation.
Okay, so it's like a general theory of motivation.
It is, yeah.
Right.
And then after SDT, the other popular ones were the reading engagement model,
Okay, the reading engagement model.
which was developed by Guthrie and Wigfield,
Okay.
and then expectancy value theory, or EVT,
EVT.
and then McKenna's model of reading attitude.